On June 12th, the US government did something it had never done before. It reached into a live deployed AI model and switched it off. At precisely 5:21 p.m. Eastern on a Friday afternoon, the Commerce Department's Bureau of Industry and Security sent Anthropic CEO Daria Amodei a formal export control directive signed by Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick with explicit warnings of civil and criminal penalties for non-compliance. Just 90 minutes later, two of Anthropic's frontier models, Fable 5 and Mythos 5, went dark worldwide. And as I record this, they're still offline. It didn't take a hack, a crash, or a courtroom order. A simple letter brought the models down. So today, I'm going to lay out exactly what happened on that Friday, show you why this is the real argument for decentralized AI that nobody framed properly until now, and then steelman the skeptics who think the whole decentralized AI narrative is just a pump wearing a nicer suit. My name is DC and you're watching The Coin Bureau. Now, before we get into crypto at all, you need to understand the climate this landed in because timing here is everything. Bitcoin is sitting at around $63,700 as I record this video. The broader market is jittery and AI has been the one narrative hoovering up capital where everything else bleeds. Into that environment, the US government just proved that the most valuable AI lab on the planet, a company with a $47 billion run rate that filed for an APO 11 days before this happened, can have its flagship product turned off by a single agency. And that is the backdrop that sent money racing into a corner of crypto most people had written off entirely. So let's start with what actually happened because the mechanics matter. Fable 5 and Mythos 5 launched on June 9th. They were live for exactly 72 hours before Washington pulled the plug. The legal authority cited was an export administration regulations and specifically something called the Deemed Export Rule under the Export Controls Reform Act of 2018. Now, for those unfamiliar, let me put that simply. A deemed export means that sharing controlled technology with any foreign national, even one standing inside the United States, legally counts as exporting it. This is the same framework used to control advanced semiconductors, encryption, and nuclear materials. And on June 12th, for the very first time, the government applied it to a commercial chatbot. The stated reason was a vulnerability, a so-called narrow non-universal jailbreak that could let the models help identify software vulnerabilities, which Washington feared could accelerate offensive cyber operations by adversaries like China. And here's the detail that's almost too perfect. The jailbreak was reportedly discovered by Amazon researchers, and Amazon CEO Andy Jassy is the one who flagged it to the administration. The catch? Amazon's own enterprise service, Bedrock, runs Claude integrations, and when the models went dark, Bedrock customers got disrupted too. So in other words, the man who pulled the fire alarm set off the sprinklers in his own building. Okay, so why did this become a global blackout instead of a targeted block? Because the directive demanded Anthropic cut off all foreign nationals, including its own foreign employees. And Anthropic argued it's simply not technically possible to verify a user's citizenship in real time across its entire API at scale. So faced with partial compliance, which was legally radioactive, or a full shutdown, the company killed both models worldwide within 90 minutes. Which meant American citizens got cut off too. A foreign access order became a total product recall. Now, you might assume this is just a one-off regulatory thing that gets resolved in a week. Well, not really. As of mid-June, negotiations with the White House had failed to produce any resolution or even an exemption for close allies like the UK. And that brings us to the deeper layer, the part that should make every person in crypto sit up. June 12th exposed a permanent structural vulnerability in how these models operate. For years, centralized AI providers have built kill switches into their products by design. OpenAI, Anthropic, and Google already block API access by country to comply with sanctions on places like Iran, North Korea, and Russia. Italy's regulator temporarily banned ChatGPT back in 2023. China built an entirely separate walled-off AI stack because it couldn't trust access to American models. So the architecture for switching AI off has always existed, but every previous case was a geographic filter, a block by location. June 12th was something new entirely. It was a citizenship-based extraterritorial order, a government demanding that a company cut off anyone who is an American anywhere on Earth. Analysts at Infotech Research called this sovereignty climbing the stack. So to put it simply, governments have escalated beyond fighting over the data and chips to asserting direct control over the intelligence layer itself. And the people in charge are not being subtle about it. Former UK Security Minister Tom Tugendhat said disabling these models wasn't a mistake, but the inevitable result of technology shaping warfare so that sovereignty is more about code than cannons. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney compared the moment to the 2008 financial crisis, warning that over-reliance on a handful of centralized AI providers creates systemic risk for entire national economies. Even FIRE, the free speech group, called it an arbitrary abuse of power, comparing it to the kill switch tactics of regressive regimes. So make no mistake, this is the censorship-resistant case for decentralized AI, and it just got a live proof point, because here's the structural difference. A network like Bittensor has no Dario Amodei to send a letter to. It's a decentralized blockchain running an open marketplace for machine intelligence across 128 plus globally distributed subnets, up significantly from where it stood a year ago. Participants contribute compute and models and earn Tau tokens in return. Shutting it down requires a simultaneous attack on thousands of node operators scattered across every jurisdiction on the planet. There is no point of failure for a government to press, and a project like Venice with VVV takes the same logic to private uncensored inference, positioning itself as AI that literally cannot be switched off by order. Which brings us directly to where the money went. In the week after June 12th, AI crypto assets saw significant inflows as investors rotated into decentralized infrastructure plays, with Tau leading the charge. Tau jumped somewhere between 28 and 30% within 12 hours, briefly touching a 3-week high near $283. Venice's VVV also reportedly gained in the same period, though independent price data for VVV is difficult to verify at this time. Grayscale's head of research, Zach Pandel, came out and explicitly framed the regulatory squeeze as validating the need for censorship-resistant decentralized infrastructure. Now, I have to be straight with you here. This is exactly the kind of reflexive, fear-driven rotation we've seen a dozen of times in our industry. The market priced in decentralized AI's potential value before that value has actually been proven. So I'm not going to celebrate a green candle because a single 30% candle proves absolutely nothing. What I will defend is the fundamentals you can actually point to. Bittensor has reportedly generated real on-chain revenue across its subnets, with figures circulating around $43 million for Q1 2026, though that's a number worth verifying directly against on-chain data. These are real fees paid for actual AI computation delivered across its subnets, completely separate from token inflation or white paper promises. Now let me give you the honest math on that. If that figure holds, $43 million a quarter annualizes to roughly $172 million against a $2.55 billion market cap. That's about a 15x revenue multiple. Not cheap, but not insane for a growth stage infrastructure network with real usage. And there's a supply story underneath it too. A halving in December cut daily Tau issuance from 7,200 to 3,600 tokens, and a registration burn introduced in April removed even more supply from circulation. Then there's the next binary catalyst. Both Grayscale and Bitwise have filed for spot Tau ETFs, with a decision window concentrated around August. If approved, that opens the door to pension funds, family offices, and registered advisors who legally cannot touch a native token today. It's the exact same institutional gateway that the Bitcoin ETF cracked open, so that's the bull case, and it's a big one. But it would be dishonest of me to leave it there, because the skeptics have a case that is just as big. On June 8th, just 4 days before the shutdown, a research consortium called IC3 published a 155-page survey paper. And this wasn't a simple tweet thread, it was 25 contributors from Cornell Tech, Princeton, Carnegie Mellon, Yale, and ETH Zurich. And their conclusions are a bucket of cold water on the hype. Cornell's Ari Jules, one of the editors, described naively combining blockchain and AI as being like soldering Jello, two technologies with completely different requirements, forced together, often degrading both. The report makes 3 points that decentralized AI bulls need to wrestle with honestly. First, the efficiency gap. The researchers found there is currently insufficient data to prove decentralized compute is even cheaper than centralized cloud for large tasks. Small inference jobs might work, but large-scale model training is, in their words, hampered by unstable, low-bandwidth communication between scattered nodes. The IC3 report specifically flags what researchers describe as a communication bottleneck. As models scale into the hundreds of billions of parameters, the delays between distributed nodes pile up, and you simply cannot match an optimized centralized data center. Second, the junk problem. Many lower quality AI tokens are already down 50 to 90% from their peaks, and academic reviews flag that a huge chunk of that category relies on off-chain computation while branding itself decentralized. The report literally calls it an illusion of decentralized AI, and the June 12th event risks inflating the whole category indiscriminately, rewarding the garbage right alongside the genuine. Third, and this is the most uncomfortable one, creeping centralization. Even Bittensor sees concentration among large tower holders and high compute nodes recreating the very hierarchy it claims to dissolve. And the hardware itself, the GPUs, still funnels back through TSMC and NVIDIA. This means the decentralization often stops at the application layer, leaving the underlying compute hardware highly centralized. And there's an even sharper challenge, which has nothing to do with crypto at all. The sovereignty problem can be partially solved by open-weight models. Meta's Llama, Mistral, and Chinese labs like Sipu and Minimax can all be self-hosted with no token and no blockchain whatsoever. And reports suggest June 12th boosted interest in exactly those Chinese open source labs which sit outside US jurisdiction entirely. So the genuinely hard question is this: does the crypto layer actually add anything that open source self-hosting doesn't already provide? And then there's the elephant in the room. The centralized labs are collectively on pace to spend roughly $725 billion in CapEx in 2026, with the lion's share directed at AI infrastructure inside global AI market Gartner pegs at $2.59 trillion. Tau at $241 is still roughly 68.5% below its all-time high of $767 set back in April 2024, so anyone who bought the top is deeply underwater, and 130% bounce does not erase a 68% drawdown. And here's a caution signal worth flagging. Grayscale itself actually cut Tau's weighting in its AI fund down to about 22.5% in late May, even as the narrative was strengthening. So even the institution filing for the ETF was trimming its own exposure. Now, this is where it all comes together, because the truth here is that two contradictory things are both true at the same time. On one screen, the kill switch is real and it's permanent. June 12th proved that a centralized AI model is now legally equivalent to dual-use military hardware, and a government can revoke it overnight for reasons it never has to fully explain. That single point of failure is an intentional built-in feature of the centralized model, and that genuinely strengthens the case for permissionless infrastructure that no letter can touch. But on the other screen, decentralized AI has not yet proven it can match centralized cost, efficiency, or raw capability at frontier scale. The verification problem alone, the fact that you can confirm a decentralized model did what it claimed without rerunning the whole computation, remains genuinely unsolved. So both things are real. The disease is confirmed, the cure is still in trials. And the reason this matters is that the rails your future AI tools run on are being decided right now, impacting everyone who uses the internet. If intelligence becomes something a government can switch off at the citizenship level, then access to the most powerful technology of the decade becomes a restricted privilege. That is the stake. That is what's actually being fought over right now. So if you want our research team's read on the August ETF decision and every twist in this decentralized AI story before it hits the mainstream, then sign up for the free Coin Hero newsletter using the link down in the description. It breaks down the biggest stories in crypto every single week, plus a slice of forward guidance, and it costs you absolutely nothing. Okay, back to it, because you need a scoreboard to watch how this plays out. So here's your watch list. First, watch whether Fable 5 and Mythos 5 actually come back online. If they're restored in weeks, the precedent looks like a politically inconsistent one-off, and the decentralized AI urgency thesis weakens. If they stay dark, this hardens into a durable policy regime, and the sovereignty case gets a lot stronger. Second, watch that August ETF decision above everything else. A Grayscale or Bitwise approval opens institutional capital that currently can't touch Tau. A rejection is a serious headwind. Third, watch Tau's quarterly on-chain revenue. That $43 million figure is the credibility anchor of the entire category. If it keeps climbing, the fundamentals are real. If it stalls, you're left holding a narrative and nothing else. Fourth, watch whether sovereign nations choose to open source self-hosting over crypto rails. Because if governments solve the kill switch problem with Llama and Mistral instead of tokens, the decentralized AI investment case loses its biggest tailwind. And fifth, watch the junk separation. The honest takeaway is that this category is still mostly noise, and the next year will be brutal at sorting real revenue from AI-washed branding. So here's the question I want to leave you with. Is decentralized AI the genuine answer, the censorship-resistant rails that survive the exact moment a government decides to pull the plug? a structurally bullish setup for the next decade? Or is it just the next narrative wearing a better suit, a reflexive trade priced on fear running on networks that can't yet match the centralized giants on cost, speed, or capability when it actually matters? Or is the only actual solution to simply use local models? Because that kill switch is real. That part isn't up for debate anymore. The only open question is whether these networks can actually deliver when Washington next reaches for the off switch. I'll be watching that August decision very, very closely. So please get genuinely opinionated in the comments and let me know which side of this you land on. And if you want to understand exactly how export control law got rewired to treat a chatbot like a missile system, then definitely check out our deep dive right over here. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you again very soon. This is DC, signing off.